Hi, Patty.
Hi, Liz. Good, you're there. Did I upgrade you to a panelist?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Lisa.
I'm just gonna practice sharing my screen here, if that's the plan for me to do that. I guess I should shut everything on my computer off.
Hi, Lisa. Sorry, I missed that. Did you just join?
I just joined, thank you. Can I practice sharing my screen? I may need your permission to do that, or did you want to share your screen? I'm happy if you want to do it.
No, go ahead. I wasn't aware that I didn't give you the ability to
No,
share.
you may have. I haven't tried yet.
Okay, yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah, no, it's disabled.
It's disabled. Okay.
Our video is also disabled, which I'm fine with also.
Oh no, that wasn't the intention. I'm just trying to understand how to.
I'm having a bad hair day, so it's probably just as well.
Okay, here we go.
All right, let's see if I can share my screen. Get that particular thing up and going.
Cheryl, if you're on the call, I made you a panelist as well. I'm not sure if that went through.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, I'll stop sharing. All right, so hopefully this will go smoothly in terms of tech.
Yes. We had 175 people registered, so.
That's pretty good considering we couldn't really promote it through the schools very well, so.
Yeah.
Good evening. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, good evening, Cheryl.
Okay, awesome. Let's see. It won't let me start my video, but I'm also not having a great hair day, so I'm fine with that.
No, I just realized in order to give you guys a video, I have to promote you to panelist and then from panelist to co-host. So.
Oh dear. Okay. Good evening, Liz and Lisa. Thank you so
Hi,
much for being here.
Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl.
Thank you. Thank you for the work I know you both did to prepare. Thanks.
So Partha, you're going to do up to and including slide 9. Is that what we decided?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to double check.
Magic. There it is.
Awesome. Good to see you, Cheryl.
See what I'm saying? It's a hot one.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, I've got a fan I'm going to put on actually.
Do we have someone in the chat who said their child is starting in kindergarten in September? That's so exciting. Welcome to our system.
Welcome everyone. For those just joining, we're just giving it a few minutes to allow more registrants to join, and we'll get started by 6:05.
Nice to see you, Ms. Holder. This is what we're saying is face to face, right?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our school reopening update. My name is Parthy Kandava. I've got the privilege to serve as our school trustee for Scarborough Southwest, which encompasses the area going from Victoria Park to Markham Road and then Eglinton to the lake, to the bluffs. So it's my privilege to help host this update, to take questions, answer questions. As you know, many of the plans are developing. However, there's certain important information that was shared with us on Tuesday night's board meeting as we begin our reopening plan. So joining me today, I'd like to introduce our executive superintendent, Ms. Cheryl Robinson Petrozzini.
Good evening, everyone, and I applaud you for that pronunciation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Cheryl is our executive superintendent for essentially most of Scarborough. Our next, joining us also are our two local superintendents who work very closely with all the schools in our area, Miss Liz Holder.
Good evening, everyone.
And Miss Lisa Dilworth.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining me in organizing this event. I'd like to start with a few, just to share some thoughts of mine recently. Welcome, it's 3 weeks away, Thursday, September 9th, but welcome back to the 21-22 school year. I hope everyone had a restful, safe, enjoyable summer. I want to take this moment to recognize and commend all the efforts, because I know there's staff on the call. All the TDSB staff for their efforts last year. It was a year like no other. So helping our schools run as smoothly as possible. Thank you. Balancing both work and home life and virtual learning is no easy task, as it is with parents. So thank you all for helping through this transition. So as we look forward for September 9th, and excited probably about it, we're of course cautiously optimistic. There's still the pandemic going on. Concerns about fourth wave and Delta variant are obviously there. So we continue to ask community to practice caution and to be flexible with all our public systems. Although we're desiring more stability and predictability, plans will continue to evolve. Conditions can change on a moment's notice, as we've all experienced over the last 20 months. We ask our parents and community members for patience as we continue to serve our public schools and create the safest school experience. So again, thank you to all the staff who are on the call and the parents. We're inspired by both of your flexibility this last year, especially going beyond your comfort zones while we've transitioned in and out of online learning, and for some families, online learning for almost 20 months. So you've shown our students a lot of resilience, very, very important value and skill set. So we're hoping this coming year will be less taxing on all of us. So welcome. Perhaps get into some housekeeping. Many of you have asked questions vis-a-vis the registration form, so we'll start with those. We're going to be there are questions that are not directly COVID related, so I'll respectfully ask you to email us aside. This is geared towards reopening and COVID. So we'll get into the COVID questions that were submitted earlier. Those of you who did not, you can place your question in the chat. Of course, I'll ask you to bear with us as we sort through all the questions. If there are local particular questions about your child's schools, and Liz and Lisa will be talking to that directly, principals will be returning on August 30th. And again, as I mentioned, there's still 3 weeks till school reopening. So I'll ask the local school specific questions to wait until then. Right now, we're looking to address the bigger picture ones and give clarity where we have clarity. And Lisa and Liz will be sharing the items that are still evolving. And of course, we're curious to your thoughts, because that'll help inform not just us, but what we take to the various committees that we sit on and are part of. So that'll be our plan. We'll look to wrap by 7 o'clock, maybe 7:15 latest. And if we can't get to all the questions, as always, feel free to email me and I'll do my best to answer or loop in the right people. Okay, so perhaps we can, Lisa, if you could start the. We acknowledge we're hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. So this is our agenda. We'll get into the presentation where you'll see the information that we are able to share, and then we can get into the Q&A and as well as, of course, your feedback. So our director has crafted the plan, or the beginning of the plan, using certain principles in mind. If you take a moment, you can look at these guiding principles that will shape and inform the recovery plan, which is both the reopening of schools, but also the content and the substance of what recovery looks like, especially in terms of skills, knowledge, equity, and well-being, of course. So as parents, as you are aware, we asked our families to indicate last week when what format or what form of learning they'd like to take in. You may have heard in the media, 86% of our families, both at the elementary and secondary level, chose in-person learning. And certainly there are many contexts and reasons why families will choose virtual. We know as educators, we know in-person is always is richer for obvious reasons, perhaps. Technology update: if you still have a device from last school year, please drop it off at your nearest TDSB schools as soon as possible. Students that are in need of a device who are continuing or perhaps choosing virtual learning should inform their home school. So device retrieval and provision will be through the local school. To give some context of how the plan and how recovery or reopening looks like, there's a work group that consists of superintendents, principals, people from important departments within our very big system: leadership and learning, school improvement, spec ed, continuing education, childcare, health and safety, and IT, of course. So these guidelines will support principals and staff to ensure health and safety. And as always throughout the year, the committee and the various groups will be revising them based on circumstances. And as you may know, school boards, we are ultimately governed by the Ministry of Education. However, in various contexts, we are able to localize and differentiate circumstances for our unique needs. So ultimately, what informs this is both the Ministry of Education, ourselves, Ministry of Health, and the Toronto Public Health, which is more in tune to local realities, facts, figures, etc. So these groups will inform our. So today, and I'll pass it over to Lisa and Liz following this. So today we're going to be talking about some significant areas, which I think many of you are keen to get further information on. We're looking at screening, case management. What does that mean? Masking procedures, protective equipment, and enhanced cleaning, transportation, ventilation, and HEPA filters, lunch routines. That's going to be, of course, an important one. Recess, outdoor breaks, assemblies, health and physical education, music, and core curricular. And those last three are still evolving, but our superintendents will speak to it. So we're here to share what is and also what is evolving in the next 3 weeks as we look towards September 9th. So I'll pass it over to you guys, Liz, Ms. Liz Holder, Ms. Lisa Dolan.
Thank you, Trustee Candival. So in terms of personal protective equipment, PPE, and cleaning, much of what happened last year will continue to take place this year. As stated previously, we do follow guidelines provided by the Ministry, Toronto Public Health, as well as our own TDSB guidelines. And so physical distancing will continue. We will continue to have students and staff engage in frequent hand washing, and the necessary materials will be provided for that. There will be cleaning and disinfecting standards that will continue. PPE will continue to be provided. Staff are expected to wear masks, as well as all students, kindergarten to grade 12. So much of what we did last year will continue when school reopens on September 9th. In terms of transportation, buses can operate. The seat behind the driver would remain empty. Everyone will be required to wear masks on the school bus. There will be assigned seating as well as a seating plan. So that will be used in the event that contact tracing needs to be happening. In terms of the TDSB protocol, we will maintain operational guidelines established last year. So masking, assigned seating, frequent cleaning. Busing for students with special education needs, excluding gifted, will begin on September 9th. For all other students, transportation will begin the following week on September 15th. Ventilation and HEPA filters, there has been much discussion about this in the media, and those will be provided in every classroom. So wherever we have students, the HEPA filter will be provided. That includes portables, the wellness room, childcares, early on centers, libraries, and so on. And we have shown there an image of the HEPA filter. It's the Austin brand that is being used, and this is what it looks like. As well, facility services, they have been very diligent in ensuring that windows in classrooms are operational so that we could have a constant flow of fresh air through the classroom. Lunch routines at the elementary level. Much of what happened last year will continue to happen. So students will continue to eat with their cohorts. Elementary students will continue to have lunch in their classrooms. Of course, they will need to remove their mask when they're eating, but at that time, we will ensure that students are physically distanced. At the secondary school level, this was a little more challenging to figure out because, as was stated previously, we have 86% of students opting for in-person learning. So at a large secondary school, for example, if the enrollment is 1,400 students, 86%, you probably have over 1,200 students returning to the school. And the school day model, what it looks like is that students will attend classes in the morning. They will have a 45-minute lunch break, and then they will attend another class in the afternoon. So during that lunch break, when you could have over 1,000 students on site, principals will need to be very creative in terms of how students physically distance during the lunch break at the secondary level. So cafeterias, they are going to be in use, but there are, of course, space limitations. So principals, school administration will need to decide the capacity of cafeterias to ensure that students can stay 6 feet apart. And so some creative solutions could be using other areas of the school creatively, such as the hallway. So that way, there is a greater space in which students can spread out. And of course, at the secondary level, students are allowed to leave campus to have lunch. If they're doing so, they are encouraged to eat their lunch off school campus and then return to the school for the afternoon class. Recess and outdoor breaks. What are the ministry guidelines? During the recess break, one slight difference is that come September, students do not need to stay within their cohorts during recess. However, they will be expected to remain physically distanced once they are having that break from masks, if they choose to do so. They may share materials outdoors, and frequent hand washing will be important. Respiratory etiquette. So for example, if you want to sneeze, do so in your elbow. And all of these routines will be reviewed with students in the elementary grades. Next slide, please. Assemblies will be gradually introduced. Of course, the safest alternative will be virtual assemblies, and that will continue. What will be gradually phased in will be in-person assemblies. What would it look like? Perhaps rather than having whole school assemblies, assemblies can be hosted for cohorts of students. So perhaps the grade 3s or the junior students only, depending on the size of where the assembly is taking place, as well as the number of students. So the plan is to begin with virtual assemblies, some outdoor assemblies, weather permitting, and then gradually phase in-person assemblies, carefully monitoring what is happening in terms of the rates of COVID. Extracurricular activities. Ministry guidelines state that clubs, activities, sports, fans, and extracurricular activities are permitted. The plan at the elementary level, as of this point, is still evolving. So we are having discussions as to whether we will hold off in the fall and then gradually phase in extracurricular activities. At the secondary level, some of the discussions that have been happening is the importance of extracurricular activities in supporting student mental health and well-being, achievement and equity of outcomes. We do know our students have had a very difficult time over the last 18 months or so. And so we want to prioritize reintroducing extracurricular activities, but we need to do so very safely. So we are still having discussions, but are very much looking forward to making those opportunities available to students when it is safe to do so.
Superintendent Holder, I just want to ask again about with regards to recesses.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I'm just going to back up. For TDSB, our protocol is it correct that we will still be taking breaks within cohorts, that they will be cohorted at recess?
Yes.
Just wanted to be sure. I wasn't sure if I heard that correctly or not. Okay. All right. Thank you. Reopening update. I'm sure you're all very pleased to see the date September 9th at the top of this slide. That will be the date of the first full day for all in-person and virtual classes. We're working very diligently to ensure that we have everything up and running for that day. The instructional model will be that all elementary schools will have in-person classes that are dedicated to virtual and dedicated virtual classes where the numbers are small in individual schools. Virtual classes will be created from clusters of schools. So it'll be different than last year. There will be no virtual school that kind of stands alone as its own entity. We will have the in-person school, which as you can see, will have 86% of the students in it. And then what we will be doing is we will be attaching virtual classes to those schools for the students who have opted for virtual instruction. What that means though is that if you have a child in school A who is virtual, wants to be virtual, they may not necessarily have a class attached to that school. We will be trying to cluster the classes in areas so that the school would be a close by school, but you might have a school that has a grade 4 and a grade 2 class that's virtual, and your child might be in grade 3. So you may need to go to another a school and have your child attached to that. Now, your child will be attached to that school just for the purposes of the virtual learning. And what will be nice about that is that your child will have the feeling of being in a school. So the principal of that school will be the principal of that class. And so the virtual assemblies, there'll be a real feeling of belonging to a school, much more so than I think we were able to do with the standalone virtual setting this past year. Simultaneous or hybrid learning, which I'm sure you've heard about in the media, is not a preferred model at the elementary level in the Toronto District School Board. However, there may be exceptional circumstances where this might be used as a solution to meet student needs. And an example of that may be specialized special education classes where we don't have the numbers to sustain separate virtual classes. In terms of switching back and forth, so I know you've all at this point received an email asking you to participate in a selection process. You've done that, and your child will be going to whichever one of those options you selected. There will be one more opportunity for people to switch back and forth in February of 2022, which is the halfway mark in our year, and it's between the semesters in secondary. We're really working hard, and as I pointed out, thinking about mental health and well-being, and in particular a sense of belonging. I think this past year has in some cases been very isolating for families and for students, and it's really important that we try to bring back that sense of community and that sense of school, and that is a priority that we're working on. If your child is in French immersion or extended French, if they're in an in-person school, they'll be welcomed back to the school, and they'll just be supported in the continued progress in their chosen program. Early French immersion, middle French immersion, and extended French programs will operate as usual during the in-person learning for students who are already enrolled in the intensive French language program. Programming may be provided, made up of straight or combined classes up to triple class combined classes if required. And again, that would be a numbers decision that would be made based on how many children are in person in a particular school. In terms of the virtual learning for French immersion and extended French, those programs will proceed only if we have enough enrollment to offer classes. And again, much like I said before with the in-person, in order to make these classes feasible, they may be made up of straight combined grades right up to a potential of 3 grades combined in one class if required. If there is sufficient enrollment, the early French immersion, middle French immersion, and extended French programming will be offered in a virtual learning class by Learning Center to students who are already enrolled in these programs. And those classes will be attached to schools that are French immersion based schools that have French programs in them already. So again, your child may not end up at their personal school, but they would be attached to a school as opposed to a separate entity. If a French virtual learning class is not available due to insufficient enrollment, a student may be accommodated in in-person learning French at their current school. So you could make the decision to go to in-person if space permits that. Or if they want to remain in virtual and there is no French learning option, they can be placed in an English virtual learning class. And then at February, again, you will have the option of switching. So you could switch back and forth depending on your preference and if space allows. So the reopening for secondary, same start date. It'll be the first day for all in-person and virtual classes. Here, the instructional model will be slightly different. There'll be in-person classes and there'll be dedicated virtual learning classes like we just talked about. And then there'll also be classes with simultaneous learning options, and that means there'll be a teacher teaching both children in front of them and children remotely who are learning from home or from another location. And that option will be offered so that we can maintain a wide breadth of programming options, so students can take a wide selection of courses, and that we can connect various school communities that are still there. So that is the instructional model. Switching is the same thing. The switching will be between semester 1 and 2 in February 2022. Again, well-being and mental health is paramount, and I know that there are various strategies that we'll be looking at with the model to ensure that students are being supported, that they're feeling a sense of belonging again, and that we are able to work with them and their families and the community so that again we're pulling together and children are able to learn. Children learn through relationship, and it's really key that we're building those relationships. Sorry. Okay. Special education. We're very committed to ensuring inclusion and making sure that our special education classes are meeting the needs of our students. So the options obviously are in person and virtual. Students who are attending virtual will receive special education programming in their regular classes, if that's their designation, or in their intensive support programs, if that's what their designation is. And they'll be supported as they would have been prior to COVID by classroom teachers, special education teachers, and support staff. Students who are in virtual and regular ISP classes receiving special education supports and programming will be connected to their home school and receive support from the classroom teacher and or support staff through models of instruction that can include dedicated teachers or simultaneous learning. And that will be based on the student's strengths, their area of growth, and the available resources that are there at the time. So that brings us to feedback and questions. I'm going to anticipate one question, and I don't know if one of the slides got mixed, so I will just quickly speak to the secondary model. I saw some questions earlier, so if you'll just indulge me for one more minute. The secondary model will be a modified semester model. And by modified, what we mean is that students will be taking 4 courses for the full semester, much like they would have done previous to COVID. However, in order to maintain cohorting, so we're keeping, and by cohorts, we largely mean classes of students together, but to keep the same children together in the same group, we have found that it would work best if we have the children in the same group for the full Monday to Friday, taking only 2 courses. So 1 week, your child might be taking math and science, and they will go through a week of doing that, and then they will flip and they will go and they will do their other 2 subjects, which would be geography and gym, phys ed. And that will be the way in which that they're able to complete a semester's worth of work, but we're also able to keep students together with not too much mixing around, so that if we are we're minimizing the transmission, but we're also able to do contact tracing if that is the case. So I think we are on to feedback and questions, so I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Ms. Holder, Ms. Dilbert, very much for the presentation. We'll get into Q&A, and I see there's a lot of questions in the chat as well as many emailed. I'm going to present the questions, trying to catch on major themes that I've noticed both in the chat and what was emailed. We'll start with a big one. A number of parents, both at the intermediate and secondary level, asked the question, their child is vaccinated. However, their child might be in a class where there may be students who are unvaccinated. Why is that the case? My understanding is that it is a legal context that the school and ultimately the Ministry of Education does not permit the ability to prevent a child who's coming in for in-person. Is that correct?
I would say that actually, if it's okay, Lisa and Liz, I jumped in there. I just wanted to say that even Toronto Public Health, the language that they use is that they strongly encourage vaccination, and they present all of the data, all of the facts that they have about why vaccination is the right way to go, and they're really promoting that. But even they haven't said that people must. They're highly, highly encouraging it, but they still, and they understand that people do ultimately have a choice.
Thank you. That was one that came up. Form selection. 2 questions. One, if a family has chosen one, whether incorrectly would like to change it now, it's after the deadline, can they reverse the decision, their choice? I think, is that a localized question?
The 2 of you, let me know when you want me to jump in. This has been, first I want to say that last year in October, having never had an opening like that to school, we ended up having a lot of reorganization, a lot of movement of staff and students, because people wanted to change the choices that they had made. So having learned from that, thinking about students who've been away from school for a long time, thinking about mental health and well-being, we know that stability is something that's really, really important, and we really want to focus on that. So Lisa had said there will be one opportunity to switch. We've been advertising this, Trustee Candival, you know, since I think maybe May or June. We've been giving that message because we want to really show what we've learned from last year. So we don't want to offer a lot of opportunities. Now, there were potentially, if there was an error in that someone was not communicated with, or those types of errors, let's say we didn't have the correct contact information or what have you, they would be able to speak with the school principal when they return. But in terms of switching or changing their minds, the opportunity to do that will be in February.
Thank you, Cheryl. Another question on outdoor learning. As we know, the months of September, October, and even parts of November are conducive to go outside, weather permitting. How is the TDSB supporting outdoor learning?
Well, I know that outdoor learning is an amazing opportunity for our students, and it just happens to also be a really healthy way to go during this time. Our outdoor ed department, I know, is working. We have actually programs that are being planted in specific model schools where they're doing work with schools, and teachers are encouraged to learn about effective outdoor ed. But we're certainly encouraging students to be outside, to be learning outside, doing phys ed outside. Any activity that they do outside is going to be infinitely safer than an activity that they're doing within the classrooms. So many schools come equipped with outdoor classrooms, those rings of rocks and logs. And so there's a lot that can be done. And many of our properties, we're very fortunate, have beautiful green space that they can be utilizing. So we are promoting it. We have a website that teachers have access to where they can learn about lesson planning, and there's a lot of support for educators who wish to engage in outdoor education with their classes.
Before we transition to the next question, I'd add to that is that as a parent, always feel free to communicate with your child's teacher and or principal to express that interest. If you're not seeing that happening, and that's something we're strongly encouraging from the leadership level. There are a number of questions on connected to outdoor learning on sports teams. Those are still evolving. Can parents get a sense, are we looking at by September 9th, or is this something evolving even into the first few weeks of school? Cheryl? Or sorry, Liz?
I was gonna ask Ms. Holder, yeah.
Yeah, it's still very much evolving. As I said, given the impact on extracurricular activities and supporting student health and well-being, we want to be able to reintroduce extracurricular activities as soon as possible. It is still under active discussion as to whether we need to wait and get school procedures in place, or whether we need to begin by having students participate in a limited number of extracurricular activities. So the short answer is a final decision has not yet been made, but we are committed to getting those up and running as soon as it is safe to do so.
Thank you, Liz. And I think what's important on this, it would be ideal that everything is nice and tidy come September 9th. The reality is we need to see if spread is happening at schools, and what does that mean at the secondary and of course elementary level. There are a group of questions from a number of parents whose child is starting JK in September, and of course with that comes trepidation and perhaps some anxiety. Of course it's a new experience for many families entering our system for the first time. Could one of you speak to what they can expect in terms of safety protocols at the JK level. One question in particular asked, will there be assigned seating? What will JK SK look like in September?
So the procedures in JKSK would be very close to what they were last year. So yes, students will be assigned to specific seats. There will be frequent hand washing. There will be eating in the classroom. So every precaution would be taken to keep students as safe as possible within the guidelines provided by the Ministry, Toronto Public Health, and of course the TDSB.
One of the important parts, Lisa just finished speaking about outdoor education, and in kindergarten, that's a huge part of how they learn. So students will also have significant time to be in the outdoors because that is part of their learning. And again, as Ms. Holder said, reinforcing hand washing, which is one of the most important things that we need to teach our kindergarten students. Another thing that I'd like to say to parents, and I just want to thank Trustee Candeval for reminding us of the importance of that ongoing communication with parents, because we recognize that with younger children, the idea of wearing masks for lengthy periods of time might be new or different or difficult for some children. So just keeping that communication going. One of the pieces that we do stress to our kindergarten educators, teachers, and early childhood educators is the importance of, supporting the health and safety, but not to the detriment of the student's sense of belonging or, comfort in the classroom. So there's a balance there between health and safety and ensuring that children are enjoying the schooling experience. So that's really important. I'm saying it here. So I want to make sure that if you don't feel that that's happening, that you're having a conversation with your child's teachers about any concerns, because kindergarten is one of the most important steps in children's schooling, and we really want them to get off to a great start. So thank you.
Exactly, and connected to that, Cheryl, on the first day, first week, parents can they enter the building or are encouraged to talk to the teacher perhaps from the sidewalk? What's the expectation?
Yeah, I think communication by phone, by sidewalk, I think we're still at the stage, especially with the new variants that we're hearing about. I think we're still at the stage where we want to limit school visits. Ms. Holder is on the operational guideline team. I think you would agree with that. Yeah, we want to limit visits to the school that aren't, essential. So yeah, there are ways to have those conversations with the teachers that respect distancing, don't require you necessarily to be in the school building. Yeah.
And connected to this, another point I want to reinforce is on local questions particular to your child's school, principals will be returning August 30th, correct? So please wait till then to communicate with them. And if you're not hearing, response, 31st onwards, please get in touch with me or superintendent. That's a critical part of those 2 weeks, September 30th onwards, is that local communication vis-a-vis the principal and or the teacher when appropriate. So similar to
Trustee Candeval, August 23rd for secondary schools and August 30th for elementary. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yes, August 23rd. So SATEC, Birchmount Park, RH King, SCAS, August 23rd. There'll be administration leadership will be in the office. So connected to JK and grade 9 are two important transition or entry points in our system. And in fact, our lowest, or rather our highest in-person learning is at the JK, and almost 91% JK and grade 9 in-person learning selection. So there are a number of questions and I know a number of parents here on the call who are nervous, of course. Their child is leaving homeschool, maybe 1 or 2 grade 8 classes, and now coming into grade 9 in person. Very important year for a number of reasons, even pre-pandemic. What can a family expect what grade 9 will look like safety, health, protocol wise? I think, perhaps to give it a bit more context, one question, the concern was particularly about hallways and movement. I'll perhaps get the ball started. That is something we cannot, school teachers, leadership can't police perhaps at every given moment, but there are expectations. And if I know we spoke to the cohorting, you'll be with cohort A for 1 week, and then the next week, what can parents hope to see or expect in the school?
So some of the things we have discussed on the operational guidelines committee is that congregated in the hallways will be discouraged. And we need to say that screening procedures would continue. So the app will be available for students to do the self-screening. So first and foremost, we are expecting our schools to be quite safe, because if there are any symptoms, then the students should not be attending school. And more specific guidelines will be coming from TPH. Also, in terms of students going to the lockers, that is going to be staggered. So rather than having an entire class of students go to the locker at the same time, we will send smaller group of students so they are not congregating at the lockers in the hallway. So all of this is being given very careful thought so that the rules of physical distancing can be maintained. And of course, a mask wearing will also be taking place within the schools.
Thank you, Liz. There are a couple of questions on PPE, and I think, Cheryl, you've responded. Children can certainly bring their own if there is a need. There is extras on site to be provided. The webinar today is being recorded. I'll upload it and we'll send the link out following today as soon as we have access to the recording. There's a question on elementary lunches children will be having lunch in the classroom. The question is, why can't they eat outside? Is that at the discretion of their classroom teacher? What is the context around that?
Well, as we stated earlier, opportunities for students to be outdoors is encouraged. So if it is that the classroom teacher, perhaps closer to the lunch break, is willing to take the students outside, but we do also need to point out that typically students, they are supervised by lunchroom supervisors during the lunch break. So given that they will, most of them, be eaten in classrooms, and we do not have a lunchroom supervisor to assign to each class, typically students will be in the classroom with a lunchroom supervisor monitoring more than one classroom, because teachers do need to stop teaching at a specific time so they can have their lunch breaks that they are entitled to.
Thank you, Liz. In the event of another shutdown, there was an extra, of course, burden placed on parents with special needs students who had challenges perhaps with learning virtually. So the question is that I know certain special needs were still allowed access to in-person following the March lockdown. If another lockdown were to happen, if a family with a special needs child wanted to access the in-person, which was allowed in certain circumstances, how would they navigate that request for the in-person? And I know, hopefully we're not in a lockdown, but in that scenario.
We do have to follow ministry guidelines on that. And so we have yet to get the guidelines for this year. So when the ministry lets us know, what is it that we need to provide, we then work on a process that we would communicate to families about how that would happen. So we don't have that in place as yet. Don't have that from the ministry.
Thank you. Can families that have secondary school students who have chosen virtual, are they being considered as the extracurricular guidelines protocols are being developed? Is that feasible at this point?
I can say there are very active discussions taking place as to how extracurricular offerings will be implemented to students in the virtual school setting. So yes, that is being considered as part of the discussions we're having.
There's another question on special education. Is a mask mandatory for children with autism?
We recognize that students with autism often have sensory issues, and certainly having their mouth and nose covered is a challenge. Like anything, this is something that would evolve through a conversation with the principal, with the special education department involved, and a resolution would be put together based on the specifics of that child's situation and needs. So it's not a blanket answer that we can give to that. It's really an individual situation. So that would be something that I think you would want to speak to your principal. If it's an elementary child on the 30th, or if they're in secondary, you would want to connect next week to start having those conversations.
So
Thank you, Lisa.
what I can add to the conversation is that today, when we were discussing what materials need to be ordered in preparation for the startup of the school, one of the things we added to the list was a variety of masks that can be used to accommodate students with special education needs. So yes, I agree with Superintendent Dilworth. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but we are also thinking strategically ahead and trying to make various options available to students that will meet their special education needs.
Thank you, Liz. At the elementary level, classes such as that are perhaps unique or prep, like gym, music, are the teachers coming to the classroom, or would an elementary class go to the that particular prep classroom?
The decision that has been made at this point would be for just what happened last year, that the teacher will continue to go to those classes.
Great. There's a question on the transition from SK to grade 1, particularly children. There are many in our system, and particularly in LC3, where students were in virtual, all of JK, SK. Sorry, well, definitely SK. And now they're transitioning to in-person grade 1. Is the thinking the same with JK, or is there anything unique to that transition coming from virtual kindergarten to grade 1 in person?
Well, one of the things we do as a system is to differentiate instruction according to the needs of the students. So naturally, if a student is going into a physical building for the first time, that will be taken into account. Different ways of knowing, different ways of learning will certainly be honored, culturally relevant approaches. And it will be on a student-by-student basis where the specific needs of students are being taken into account and adequate planning undertaken on the part of the teacher to meet those needs.
And that's definitely something that I know we've been talking about with our principals, even prior to the end of the school year, is what will that transition look like, in particular for the little ones that are coming into a building for the first time. The transition from the kindergarten program to grade 1 can be very challenging for children, and we're really looking at, just as Superintendent Holder said, being very responsive. And I think that this pandemic is really going to challenge us to really be very good and very intentional at our assessment and our differentiation for students. And I think that there's an opportunity here for growth for us as educators, and to really be able to promote good child-centered learning right through from grade 1 up.
I would also add to that, when we think about the priorities and the principles, one of them is forming those relationships with students, paying attention to their health and well-being. And this is why if a child is entering grade 1 after a year and a half of being in the virtual setting, that will certainly be taken into account in supporting that student to be successful with the transition.
Would a teacher know which students are coming from virtual?
Yes, that would be something that we would be encouraging principals to have those conversations with teachers. I think our intake of students this year is going to look different than it has in the past for that very reason, because not just in the kindergarten grades, but the other grades, there are a lot of protocols that were in place last year in schools that some children are going to be really well versed in, and other children are going to be very new to. So there's going to be some learning for all of them, but in particular for the students that are coming in from the virtual. So a lot of conversation and a lot of learning, a lot of listening, and a lot of patience.
Do we follow the same guidelines if there's a COVID case or outbreak in a classroom or a school as we had last year? Are the protocols or guidelines the same? TPH's involvement, et cetera?
Those are still being developed, and we do need some input from Toronto Public Health before that process is shared with the system and parents.
And thank you so much, Superintendent Holder. The reason why we couldn't just answer that is because of vaccinations. So because we have a high rate of vaccination, it may be that Toronto Public Health might decide on different processes to deal with outbreaks. So we're still waiting for final information on that.
At the secondary level, or even at elementary with choir, the expectation is for students to be masked. There's concern that that might not be possible.
What we have discussed at this point is if singing is taken indoors, the mask will be worn and there will be physical distancing.
The second question is to do with vaccination. We spoke about that child. There isn't any enforcement of or prevention of students who are not vaccinated. TPH has not indicated, and the ministry hasn't given that ability to refuse entry for unvaccinated students. If perhaps you can speak to how at the secondary level, how locker access or hallway usage is going to be staggered. Could you elaborate more on that?
Well, some of the initial information we have is that close to 80% of students have had their first vaccine. Hopefully, by the reopening of school, the majority of secondary students would have had both vaccines. But even so, we want to take every precaution in terms of mask wearing and physical distancing, and establishing routines so that students do not congregate. And this is why I shared earlier, in the case of students having to go to their lockers to retrieve or to store materials, we're operating in COVID times, so the entire class wouldn't be allowed out in the hallway to do that at the same time. Students are going to be staggered. So perhaps, I'm not saying this is exactly what it would look like, but an example could be 5 students at any one point in time. Then when those students go back in, another set of students are sent in the hallway. And that way we are avoiding a scenario in which students are congregating and the rules of physical distancing are not being observed.
Can a parent know the vaccination status of their child's teacher? I'm going to guess no.
Yeah, I think at this time, I would say, first of all, let me be frank that, that could evolve. Let me just say that. What we are looking at now is, the new, I don't even know what the word is right now, if it's legislation, let's just go with procedure, is that education workers would need to be vaccinated. But if they are not, they would need to undergo regular testing. So those two things are still there. It's vaccination or regular testing. So that's where we are currently. And if there's going to be, obviously we are still evolving in terms of putting a system in place so that for those who are not vaccinated, we would be seeing to the regular testing.
Regular testing.
Yeah.
Can you speak to, and this is a broader question on mental health. We know, particularly in our ward, we've got perhaps a larger than city average of number of students are going from virtual to in-person. And in either scenario, really, mental health well-being has been important piece for children at this age. What supports training development what will the focus be on mental health in these first few weeks, first few months? How are we preparing teachers and staff to ensure there is focus on well-being?
Well, I know through the preparation of the return to school documents that there's significant emphasis being placed on well-being and looking at students' mental health. We're providing teachers with a lot of resources that they can support to access. We also talk a lot about the importance of, at the beginning of the school year, getting to know their students, getting to know their families, listening actively. And so, parents may not see a lot of what they would see as structured instruction in the way they might have thought of it. There'll be a lot of assessment. And when I say assessment, I don't mean tests necessarily. I mean a lot of listening and learning. There'll be learning through interactions and games and different ways so that the teacher can actually ascertain who the child is, both in the classroom and out of the classroom. We're really trying to center our children and their state of mind in the work that we're doing. And it's really, really critical that we take the time in September to learn who our students and our families are again, and to bring them together and build that sense of community. But in terms of, urgent mental health and wellness needs, the same social work supports are in place. All of those pieces are there and will be accessible as soon as we start school. And I know they're accessible now. I know online they have drop-in sessions even currently. So definitely it's something that we're making sure teachers are aware of and that they are on the forefront of mindfulness and making sure that our students are doing well and adjusting.
And part of that learning that you're talking about, Superintendent Dilworth, is being provided by our mental health lead and our virtual learning leads. They are working on professional learning for teachers. But I think a couple of things that I would like to add to that is, I had the opportunity to attend one of Superintendent Holder's regular meetings that she has with principals, the Learning Network meeting. And this is back in, I think, early June. And at that time, I saw conversations about what are we going to do to support students' mental health in the fall. So I just want to say to parents who are on this call that it's not something that we're only thinking about now or planning for now. We have been thinking about this since before the last school year ended, because we know that we have some children who have not been in a school for a year and a half. We know that COVID has hit certain communities a lot harder. We know that we are going to have students who have actually lost family members to COVID-19. And we have to be really open to understanding. And at the same time, I also want to say that we want to ensure that kids are engaged in important learning that respects their culture and their identity while we are looking at their well-being. And I say this because kind of like what Superintendent Dilworth was saying, parents might not see that, we've taken a whole month out to only talk about mental health and well-being. We're going to do that in tandem with learning, because one of the ways that we support students' well-being and mental health is the work that we do in schools, right? Giving them that sense of belonging, helping them to achieve to the best of their abilities. So those two things are very much connected. The learning that they're doing is connected to their mental health and well-being. So I just wanted to say that, and that we are going, and the other thing is that it's not a September activity. It's not a one-time activity. This needs to be ongoing. So.
Exactly. And one thing I will mention to parents, as the age-old education cliche goes, that you are your own best advocate, you are your child's best advocate. There's context for that. I think as a parent, communication with your child's teacher is so important pre or post-COVID. And if it's something you feel is perhaps missing, not that is a reflection of the teacher, because there's so many balls that teacher could be doing a lot of outdoor stuff, right? Mention it, ask to say, how are you incorporating well-being into the classroom? So that communication at the local classroom level is paramount. Sorry, Superintendent Holder, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I will also add that one of the guiding principles of the pandemic recovery plan is centering students' identity and voice in creating innovative and engaging learning experiences for all students. So one of the ways in which student mental health and well-being would be integrated in everyday programming will be asking students questions simply: how are you doing? What are you interested in learning about? How do you learn best? And using that sort of student-centered data to inform instruction in the classroom through culturally relevant and responsive approaches. So there will be a multitude of approaches to addressing student health and well-being by honoring their voice through the quality of instruction, but also through more direct support services that can be accessed by having discussions with your child's teachers and principal.
Thank you. For secondary students who are going to be in virtual in the fall and transition to in-person in February, when would they get their ID photos?
I think that is something that will evolve over time. I know that even the procedure for switching, obviously at this point, hasn't been defined. So I think that's something that we would probably have to answer.
If a family is on vacation returning mid-September, in this case, September 19th, what is the rule for returning? Are they isolating? I know it's not our rule, it's the government's. What does anyone know that expectation on isolation post-flight?
I anticipate that sort of direction will come from Toronto Public Health, because they will be asking questions such as, are you vaccinated or not? Have you had a COVID test or not? And so we are awaiting those very granular details from Toronto Public Health.
Mhm.
I think it would be best that they get in touch with Toronto Public Health
Yeah.
for guidance. Yeah.
I think following up on the mental health piece at the secondary level, how can an adult, how can a parent, and as we know, at the secondary level, the mental health concerns are heightened. How can a parent who feels their child needs, whether it's the support of a guidance counselor or a social worker or mental health community service worker, how would a parent, who would they speak to ensure that their child, if he or she needs it, is able to access it at the secondary level?
They can speak with the guidance counselor, they can speak with the administration, with their child's teacher. So any one of those individuals will be able to direct them as to how to access the necessary support.
There's a question on staggered entry at the elementary level. We are not doing that. We're starting on September 9th.
The only thing that's a little bit staggered is transportation.
Mhm. Will students need their own laptops for school? I'm guessing that question is perhaps at the secondary level. Are devices necessary if you're in person? Or is that up to the student family?
I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is that over the last year and a half, all of our students, if they weren't digital learners before, they now are. And so I think families can expect a variety of blended learning strategies to be used in the classroom, which will definitely include the use of technology. So if it is at a high school level, someone was thinking about taking their own device in, you can contact your child's principal and ask them about the bring your own device policy.
Will the grade 11 literacy test be happening? Do we have guidance on that?
I believe it is. I believe that that students will have the opportunity to write the OSSLT this year, but it will be for in-person students. If virtual students wish to write it, and this is what the EQAO official word is, they will be accommodated in an in-person situation.
And just to be clear, that might change.
Okay. For secondary virtual, how will it will be the simultaneous model where the teacher, there's a camera that will be facing the whiteboard or blackboard, and teaching will occur through audio and video. How will, for parents who are selecting that for the first time, is there further context or information you can provide how simultaneous learning will be happening at the secondary level and course selection?
I have been in a simultaneous classroom, and in fact, it was a theater arts class, and it was very much what you described. There were students at home, and there was a screen in the classroom, and the children weren't sitting because it was theater arts, but they were actually working collaboratively with the students who were actually off screen or off site, and it was they loved it. They enjoyed it. I don't believe that every virtual class, though, will be simultaneous. It will just be for subjects that they are unable to find enough students to make viable in one site. So the majority of virtual learning will likely not be simultaneous at the secondary level.
And Trustee Candival, you've been saying all evening the importance of communication with your child's teacher. And I want to reiterate that because I know I have had phone calls from parents who are concerned that their child would not get as much attention as the children who are in person. So if you're hearing that from you, especially grade 9 students, if I believe we're not going to be in the situation of needing to have probably any simultaneous classes, but in the rare, in grade 9, but in the rare case that that may happen, if you have any concerns of that sort, I don't think my child is getting enough attention, or this mode of learning doesn't seem to be meeting their needs, it's giving that feedback to the teachers that helps them to better understand how to support kids. And the earlier we can do that, the better, because we don't want to wait for any sort of report card or reporting, right? Thank you.
Exactly. We'll go to our last question. I know we've gone beyond what I've requested you guys to come out for. Last one is, will cameras be required to be on for online at the secondary?
I'm assuming, do they mean for, well, I can speak to the staff, that teachers who are teaching virtually, so whether that's in a simultaneous or just virtual, elementary and secondary will be expected to have their cameras on.
And students, I think that is still discretionary based on the student. So I hope tonight has been of help to families as they start to look at school reopening on Thursday, September 9th, about 3 weeks from now. There's still a number of pieces to do, as you heard tonight, on extracurricular sports clubs that are still evolving, and we'll be in touch with families through TDSB Connects, as well as I'll be sharing information as things develop, as the plans become more clear. As always, please be in touch with me through email. I can connect you with the appropriate staff on a particular question. In regards to school-specific questions, as we shared, August 23rd, secondary schools are reopening with administrative staff. So Berkshire Park, SATEP, RH King, August 23rd. Elementary schools are reopening August 30th. If it's school specific, please be in touch with your local principal. And of course, as we inch towards September 9th, getting in touch with your classroom teacher, of course, is the best place to begin that conversation and express any concerns or questions. Any final thoughts or messages, Cheryl, Liz, Lisa?
If I could, sorry, I'll go first. That way the two important people finish off. I just wanted to say, just in relation to that last question there, we do anticipate that you will be hearing from your children's schools before the startup, just in terms of routines and health and safety measures and all of those things. So looking forward.
Would they also, sorry to interrupt, Cheryl, would they also know the child's teacher before the 9th?
Likely, yes. Yeah. So likely, some schools do those things a little bit differently. So I don't want to make a blanket statement, but likely.
Gotcha.
I do really want to thank Superintendent Dilworth and Holder for the work and the support this evening. We are extremely excited to welcome your children back to school this fall. And number one is health and safety, but you heard me say there's actually two number ones, because we want to support their learning and their well-being. And that's the work that we are currently doing. You know that the ministry guidelines were released not that long ago. So I also want you to keep that in mind. If you might be saying, why don't they have that worked out? Because we first have to get the guidelines from the ministry, and then we have to make it work in the TDSB. And that's what we are busy doing. And people are working around the clock to ensure that we have a wonderful opening for your children. And do keep in touch with us and let us know if you have any concerns. We want this to be a very positive experience for your children. Thank you for taking the time to be here this evening.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Lisa and Liz. Before I hand it to you guys, I wanted to appreciate your hard work, not just for today, but through the last year. For parents who are on the call, who may know Lisa and Liz, are our superintendents for Scarborough Southwest, incredibly hardworking, diligent, and very supportive of our school. So I just wanted to give a shout out to express my gratitude for them as we start year 2 together in September. Over to you guys.
And thank you, Trustee Candival. I wanted to say thank you to the parents. I recognize some of the names on the call, and of course, you are valuable partners in the education of your children. Thank you for being here. And I also recognize the names of some of our administrators. So thank you also for the interest you have shown in attending the webinar to get more information about startup procedures for the new school year.
And I really have very little to add to all of that, except I'm very excited to be starting back again. I know that it's going to be a wonderful time to have 86% at least of our families back in the schools, and also to be able to service the people that have chosen the virtual option at local schools. I think it's going to be a very warm, welcoming environment. So thank you all for all the work you do with your children, whether you're educators or parents, and here's to a great year.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Liz, Cheryl, appreciate it. Thank you to all the parents. Have a good evening and a great rest of the summer. Bye now.
Thanks very much, Trustee Candeville.
Thanks, Trustee Candeville.
Yeah, thank you guys.